today it's we carry on with the Fruit of the Spirit series, and the topic, the one that I've chosen for today, is self-control. So before we get into the sermon sounds like a very heavy word, it's kind of scary, but anyway, but before we get into that, I have a small, just a 2-minute thing that Zoe and Thea will do, and Zoe, Thea and Lily will do, and then we'll get into it. We'll start.
I had this triple chocolate cake for my friends that were coming over, and it was in the fridge to thaw out. I went to get a glass of water and thought, why don't I just open up the door and check on it, see how it's doing. I opened the door and I was taken aback because the cake said, "Hello, Rachel." So I said, "Hello, triple chocolate cake. How are you doing?"
Not too bad. And yourself?
I'm fine. We continue to talk about those normal things that cake and people talk about, like what's it like being human and what's it like being a cake. After a while, I said, "Well, I'm tired. I really only came for a glass of water. I must go to bed."
Don't leave me. It gets so boring here, only with a couple of foods to talk. You know, they don't chat very well.
Well, what am I to do?
I know. Take me out of the fridge and put me on the counter. We can have a nice chat. Then we can put me back.
So we talked for a while, and then I said, "Listen, Keki, cause by this time we were getting friendly. Are you defrosted?"
Well, there's only one way to tell. Stick your finger in my cream and have it taste. It will only be a little tasty. Cover it up again with more cream.
And I thought, well, it's all right. So I stuck my finger in Keki's cream and had a lick. Then I said, "Well, your cream is defrosted, but I want to know, are you defrosted deep down in your middle?"
Well, there's only one way to know for sure. Why don't you cut off a small slice of me and taste it to see?
Eat it.
So I got out my knife and took as small a slice as I could muster. That night, one thing led to another. The plate with its spongy crumbs, the spoon with its little bits of cream, and the knife all screamed. I thought, what have I done? I killed Keki. As I lay in my bed that night, tossing and turning, I knew what went wrong. I opened the fridge door.
Okay, so I'm sure all of us have been in that situation, whether it's with chocolate cake or gulab jamun or with many other things. Anyway, so just to start, want to start with a prayer. Lord Jesus, Holy Spirit, just commit this time into your hands. Pray that every word that is uttered, Lord, is aligned to your heart, Lord. Just welcome you to just use me and speak through me, Lord, this morning. In Jesus' name. So, I've chosen self-control because it's one of the things that I actually struggle with actively the most. It's the one I fall short on, though I of course fall short on all the fruits of the Spirit. But the active struggle and everyday struggle is actually with self-control. It's the one I talk to myself about a lot, is that every day, about how I'm not able to do this. So that's why I chose this. So actually the meaning of self-control as per the dictionary is the ability to control oneself, in particular one's emotions and one's desires, especially in challenging times, in challenging situations. And when you look around, the world actually puts people who have self-control on a pedestal. It's like a special group of people. It's a very us and them kind of a thing, where it's a value that is admired, and it's like a trait that you feel has to be worked on, developed from the inside. You got to do your bit and really arrive at that. And when I was going online, the number of books that are there on how to build your self-control, there are just lists and lists and lists of books out there. And the other thing I found interesting is that things like achievement and success is attributed to people who have self-control, who are disciplined. They wake up at 4 in the morning and they sleep early, they don't open their social media at night, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they a no is a no and a yes is a yes. So those are people who are achievement people. So those are people that self-control is attributed to. Also, good health is attributed to people with self-control, who stay away from the carbs, stay away from the sweets, don't stay away from exercise, and on their cheat day can manage to have just that one slice of pizza and nothing else. People who give up addictions are also people who are seen as people who have self-control, because they've really been able to control their urges and not give in to their temptations. Successful relationships are also attributed to having self-control. It's about keeping your emotions in check. Having control to say just what you need to say, choosing grace over bursts of irritation, choosing kind words when you actually want to scream, or keeping quiet when you actually have lots to say. All of this so even relationships and the success of relationships is actually seen as something where people with self-control actually are able to do. But this whole space is a super scary space for me. I can just recall the number of times I put my hands up and I say, I don't have it. I don't have self-control. I say I don't have self-control about being healthy, about going to the gym, about eating right, about being healthy. I don't have it when I'm with Wendell and the girls. I'm impatient, I get irritated. I work late into the night, which I don't actually need to, but I do that because I couldn't stop binge watching a silly show or just scrolling aimlessly on social media without watching anything in particular. I cannot, nothing value has come into my head. So the list kind of carries on. But what gets me every time is my response when I fail to have self-control. There are two extreme reactions and I realize both are extremely unhealthy. At one end, I blame myself completely. It is accusatory. I say it's my fault. I get angry with myself. There's guilt, there's shame because I messed up. The other extreme is that I blame the devil completely. It's all his fault. He's the one who tempted me and I have no control over him. And he's working on my vulnerabilities, he's working on my weaknesses, so I don't take any responsibility. Both are extreme reactions and I've realized both are actually completely incorrect and wrong. So now let's look at what the Bible actually says about self-control. And importantly, why should we have it and how can we get it? So the Greek word for self-control is enkratia. Basically the word kratos denotes the presence and significance of force or strength rather than its exercise. It's just the presence of this force in you versus exercising it. So self-control actually refers to keeping in check one's strength, one's power, one's ability, choosing not to indulge in oneself. Now there seems to be a little kind of contradiction in this entire space of self-control because you see the word self in it. And so the interesting thing is that what the Bible says is that it is not about me bringing myself under my own control. It's about bringing ourselves under the control and power of Jesus. And under a God who is loving, who has the best plans for us, bringing ourselves under the control of Him. And for me, this is a really powerful shift in perspective, on what self-control actually is. It takes away the burden from myself and the responsibility, but at the same time, I know what I need to do as well. It's about bringing myself under His control. So 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline." Very clearly tells us where it comes from, not something generated within. So why is self-control? Okay, this is definition, it's good to have it, but why is it important? Why can't we just indulge sometimes? Just let go sometimes, a little bit here and there. What is wrong with it? What are we going to miss out on? Are we really going to miss out on anything? And thank God we don't have to figure this out on ourselves, because the Bible is very clear on this. It tells us why it's important. And I just thought we look at it in two ways. One is that why is it important because what it does for me, and why is it important because what it does for God's plans. So if you look at the first thing about why it's important for me, the first thing is that it keeps me holy. In Proverbs 25 it says, "Like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks self-control." In those times, the city was a refuge. Whenever there were attacks, whenever there was danger, everybody ran into the city. Why did they do that? Because it had walls around it. It protected the people. It did not leave the people exposed and vulnerable. Similarly, when our walls come down, we become vulnerable. I'm sure we've all heard this phrase, and even what Zoe Thea did about one thing leads to another. So I can think of so many times when I've let go just a little, like that one lick of cake, and then I've gone down a road which is like a huge rabbit hole, and it's just kind of gone on and on. So interestingly, what this verse also tells us, that self-control is not a problem, it's a sin. Because when our walls come down, it allows the devil in. It allows sin into our lives. And we become vulnerable. And then we can't stay holy because we can't hear God. We can't hear Him. We don't know what He's up to. It makes us very difficult to become, and not to become, but to stay righteous. Also, when it comes to keeps me holy, it also helps us resist devil. Because it says in 1 Peter 5, it says, "Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." So it keeps me holy because it also helps me resist evil. The other thing in this keeps me holy comes is that it also allows me to stay in touch with God. Because in 1 Peter it also says, "Be clear-minded and self-controlled so that you can pray." So you can pray means prayer is one of those key things that helps us stay in touch with God, that we can talk to God and we can hear from God. And when we don't have self-control, that pathway also gets polluted. So if this is what it does for me, what does it do for God's plans? God has plans for my life. When I don't have self-control, it allows God's plan, when I do have it, it allows God's plans to be revealed in my life and to actually be realized in my life. And the plans are the best plans. There are enough verses that say they're good plans, perfect plans, great plans. So when we have self-control, then God can work in our lives and we can allow His plans to come to pass. In 1 Corinthians 9, 24 to 25, it says, "Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown, that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. So when you are in training and when you're looking at the crown, you're looking at the prize, you need to give up the desires of the flesh. And when you think of training, I was just reading up on Usain Bolt. 3 times he's won like medals and medals and medals. And what did he say? He actually said that after he won his 3rd Olympic medal, he said, you know what I went and did? I had McDonald's chicken nuggets because I had stayed away from it for so long. I couldn't eat it. But that is what it required him to do, he was able to stay away from it, and that's of course. And our prize is not here on earth. This, he got an Olympic medal. Our prize, just like that verse said, is forever. It's everlasting. And we were all created for a unique purpose, and God has literally died for that purpose, so that we may lead an abundant life. So strict training and self-control is important for His plans for our life to actually come to pass. The other thing about God's plans is not just about God. God didn't just have plans to make us happy, to allow us to prosper, for us to get the prize in heaven, for us, all about me. He wanted to use us here as well. He wanted to use our lives to serve others for His sovereign plan to unfold. So not just does self-control help His plans for our lives to be revealed, but it also allows His plan for mankind through our lives to be revealed and to come to pass. And we have 2 stories in the Bible, really godly men who went completely astray because they gave into temptation, and we'll never know actually how it messed up God's plan. We'll never know. We have David in 2 Samuel 11. The story starts about, really it's a one thing led to another story. He first indulged himself by relaxing instead of going to war. He chose this. When he saw a woman bathing, he chose not to turn away and allow his gaze to linger. He then chose to send someone to find out about her. Then he chose to sleep with her. Then he chose to manipulate her husband in order to cover up his sin. Then he chose to have the husband killed. And the last verse in chapter 11, it says, the Lord was displeased. So David was a king. And we all know that God's plans for a king and how He uses people in power is so amazing, so important. He was a king. And I was just thinking that maybe God wanted to use him to do such wonderful things. He wanted to use his position to maybe carry out his purposes for his people. But David displeased God. And he went down a whole different path. And we'll never know what could have been. Then we also have another king, King Solomon, who did everything that God actually asked him not to do. He said, do not take many wives. He went and did just that. He said, do not accumulate large amounts of gold and silver. There are chapters on how much gold, silver, horses, chariots, I don't know. There's just like so much he went and did. The crazy numbers in terms of how much accumulation of wealth that he went out and did. Again, after starting off so well, he completely lost his relationship with God. And how did that impact God's plans for his life and for his kingdom? We'll again never know that. So therefore, why is it important? Just to summarize that, it is because it allows me to stay holy, and it allows His plans for my life and for mankind through my life to actually come to pass. All this is very good to know, why it's important and all of that, but how should we do this? That's always the tough one when it comes to these things. So let me first contextualize by saying that none of all that I'm going to say is what I do. It's all very, very hard to do. While thinking about my sermon and putting my thoughts down, I have to say that I worked through the night. And in that night, again, I didn't have to work through the night. I could have probably worked for 2 hours and got it done. But I ate chocolate cake, and I don't even like chocolate cake, late into the night. I watched many an Elvis YouTube video because I was obsessed with Elvis and the movie. So I'm absolutely no expert on this. But thank God you don't have to depend on my expertise, and we can look to God and the Bible. He gives us a roadmap in terms of what to do. First is change our perspective. Recognize that it's coming under Jesus' control and not our own control. It is His strength that will help us overcome our weakness. It is His power that will fight the temptations that the evil one presents. So in 2 Corinthians 12:9, it says, but He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on. So clearly it's not about my power. So the first thing I think we need to do is change our perspective. The second is submit to Jesus. Make a decision to follow Him or recommit yourself to Jesus. Talk to Him, tell Him your struggles, confess the private and hidden sins that makes you feel shame and guilt, small and insecure. There are some of these self-control and temptations that everyone knows. I'm sure everyone knows my temptations. Everybody knows some of our temptations. But there are a whole long list of temptations that are hidden that only we know of. We don't share that because there is shame and guilt associated with it. Ask Him for help. He loves you like no other. So why is He not going to show up and help you? I was reading about the Alcoholics Anonymous. I went on their website and I was just reading up on them. It was founded by two Christians, Bill Wilson and Bob Smith. And one of the key principles that they have is this. We admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And we know how much this AA has actually helped people overcome it, because it's about submitting to God. So submit to Jesus. And the third thing is remain in Jesus. I wish it was like a one-time thing. I submit to God and all gone, all temptations gone. It's just like whoosh. I can really become one healthy eating, slim, gym loving, obsessed person. But that's really not how it works, and God actually knows that if He did that for me, next day I would be back to doing all the things that I shouldn't be doing. So it's important to not just submit to Him, but to remain in Him. Seek His presence, spend time in worship, soak in His sweet, sweet love. This is so important because, like we said in the beginning, the devil is on the prowl and he is looking to really attack people who are submitted to Jesus. His sole purpose is to take us away from God. So to end this, I know I've shared about some of the things that I struggled with and the things I give into, and about how I lack this. But there have been moments, just moments, where remaining in Jesus and through His power, I was able to exercise self-control. And that's really made an impact in my life. And I just wanted to share 2 short stories on that. This year for the first time, I kept Lent. I've never kept Lent. Out of the 40 days, I managed 36 days. I didn't have dinner for 36. I remember the number, as you can see, it was a big thing. But I know that when I started it, it was really asking God for His control, to give myself up to Him. I said that to Him. And I know it was because of that, and I really know it was His strength that got me through those days. But I actually was able to see one area in my life that I actually gained favor and I was able to improve. Ever since I've had the girls, I've not been a full-time working person. I've only worked part-time. But this year, not only did I start full-time work, I started my own business. My full-time maid left for Assam. But I actually, when I think back, I really believe that I managed to get work going and do it well because of what had submitted those 40 days to God and sought His control over my life. You know, and I have enjoyed now the impact of that in my everyday life. I've seen the impact of that. The other story is about, actually not mine, it's Wendell's story, but you know, he did his aircraft maintenance course and he became an engineer many years back. But after he got his degree, for 2 years he didn't have a job. And so he worked in a small shop, in a cold storage shop in Mahim, you know, as a cashier. So he was an engineer working as a cashier for 2 years. And when I think about this story, you know, in that time, many men would have done things very differently. You know, we've heard of stories about how when people don't have jobs, they get aggressive. They, you know, they take to alcohol, they take to drugs, or they try to make a quick buck, you know, doing some side business here and there. But Wendell chose to pray constantly, and he proudly says the only other time he prayed so much was before we got married, because I was giving him a lot of grief. But you know, that time he really chose to pray and to remain in Jesus. He was submitted to Jesus, but he chose to remain in Him during that time. And because of that, Jesus protected him. He kept him away from things that he could have gone down, and Wendell, you know, would have been some totally different man. But after 2 years, he got a job with Jet Airways, and he knew right in the beginning that God had a plan for him to do this kind of work. That plan may not have come to be had he not submitted and remained in Jesus at a time when temptation was on the prowl, when the devil was on the prowl. And he, you know, and if he hadn't really held on to God at that time. So just to end, you know, just thought I'd say that we all will fail at self-control if we plan to do it on our own. We're not going to get through this. Even if we open all those lists of books that I saw online on self-control, 5 ways to get self-control, 7 ways to get self-control, no, none of that's going to work, because we weren't meant to do this on our own. It's truly a fruit of the Spirit. So maybe we should call it Spirit controlled and not self-controlled. You know, let Him reign. He will set us free of temptations. He will bind our urges, so that we can be holy. We can resist the devil, so that His perfect plans for our lives can come to pass, and so that we can grow closer to Him, and so that His sovereign plan for mankind can come through us both. This will bring us closer to Him. This will make us have a more intimate relationship with Him. And isn't that the whole point of being a Christian? To grow closer to Jesus and to be completely submitted and remain in Him.